Some movies flop, others leave a crater so big it takes entire studios down with them. These are the cinematic sinkholes, the ones that didn't just lose money, they vaporized it, took careers with them, and made accountants cry into their calculators. What happens when the dream project turns into the debt that kills the company? Let's dig into 18 legendary disasters that didn't just miss the mark, they blew it off the map. Heaven's Gate, 1980. Michael Cimino was Hollywood royalty after The Deer Hunter. United Artists gave him total creative freedom for his next film, a Western epic called Heaven's Gate. It started with a $12 million budget. Then Cimino began rebuilding entire sets because they didn't look right, relocating trees for the perfect shot, and demanding dozens of takes for even simple scenes. By the end, the budget had exploded to $44 million, with 220 hours of raw footage. The final cut ran 3 hours and 39 minutes, and audiences hated it. Critics trashed it as bloated and self-indulgent, and the box office returned just $3.5 million. The loss was devastating. United Artists, a storied studio founded by legends like Charlie Chaplin and Mary Pickford, collapsed under the debt. It was sold off, marking the end of an era. Cimino went from Oscar-winning genius to industry pariah almost overnight. Heaven's Gate became a film school cautionary tale, proof that too much freedom, too much money, and too much ego can burn down even the biggest Hollywood house. Cutthroat Island, 1995. Carolco Pictures was riding high in the early 90s, with hits like Terminator 2, Total Recall, and Basic Instinct. But debts were piling up, and the studio needed a blockbuster to save it. They bet everything on Cutthroat Island, a swashbuckling pirate adventure starring Gina Davis, directed by Rennie Harlin. The production was a mess from day one. Harlin kept pushing for bigger sets, riskier stunts, and more spectacle, even putting $1 million of his own money into script rewrites. Crew members quit after Harlin fired his chief camera operator. Davis wanted to walk, but her contract trapped her. When it finally hit theaters, audiences stayed away. On a $98 million budget, it made just $10 million worldwide. The flop was so infamous that Guinness World Records called it the biggest box office bomb in history at the time. Carolco folded almost immediately. The failure was so toxic it scared studios off pirate movies for years until Pirates of the Caribbean made them profitable again in 2003. For Harlin and Davis, it was a career hit they never fully shook off. Mars Needs Moms, 2011. Disney thought it had a slam dunk, a big-budget animated adventure produced by Robert Zemeckis using his signature performance capture style. But Mars Needs Moms became a textbook example of how good intentions can turn into one of the biggest financial disasters in animation history. With a staggering $150 million budget, the film looked expensive but never found an audience. Critics called it uncanny and lifeless, and families stayed away. The worldwide box office? Just $39 million, barely a quarter of what it cost to make. The failure didn't just hurt the movie's reputation, it shut down Image Movers Digital, Zemeckis' own studio, after only 2 films. Disney walked away from performance capture animation entirely, deciding it wasn't worth the risk. In the end, Mars Needs Moms became infamous, not for its story about a boy saving his mother, but for how it killed a studio and marked one of Disney's worst ever losses. Titan AE 2000. Fresh off the success of Anastasia, Fox Animation wanted another hit. They aimed high with Titan AE, a sci-fi epic combining traditional and computer animation with A-list voices like Matt Damon and Drew Barrymore. On paper, it was supposed to be their answer to Star Wars. Instead, it was a slow-motion disaster. Production delays, budget overruns, and a shaky marketing campaign left the movie vulnerable. It cost $75 million to make and earned only $36 million worldwide. Worse, Fox Animation had already laid off most of its staff before the film even came out, a clear sign they knew trouble was coming. When the movie tanked, the studio didn't even try to recover. Fox shut down its animation division within a week of release. Today, Titan AE has a small cult following, but for Fox Animation, it's remembered as the film that pulled the plug for good. The Fall of the Roman Empire, 1964. Samuel Bronston had made a name producing lavish historical epics. The Fall of the Roman Empire was meant to be his masterpiece, and it was in the worst possible way. The production built a full-scale replica of the Roman Forum, the largest outdoor set Hollywood had ever seen, sprawling across 92,000 square meters. It was a visual marvel, but the $19 million budget, enormous for the time, was a gamble. The film earned back only about a quarter of its cost. Within 3 months of release, Bronston's company was bankrupt. The film didn't just sink a studio, it sank an entire genre. After its failure, Hollywood avoided ancient Rome for decades. It took Gladiator in 2000 to revive sword and sandal epics, but by then, the fall of the Roman Empire was remembered mainly as a cautionary tale about going too big too soon. Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within 2001. Square Pictures set out to change filmmaking forever. Their mission: create the first truly photorealistic CGI human characters in a feature film. Backed by parent company Squaresoft, the makers of the hit Final Fantasy games, they poured 4 years and $137 million into The Spirits Within. The result was visually stunning for its time, but the story left audiences cold. Fans of the games were confused by a plot that had little connection to the series, and general moviegoers didn't connect with its characters, no matter how lifelike they looked. The box office was brutal. The Spirits Within earned just $85 million worldwide, far short of breaking even. The losses were catastrophic. Square Pictures shut down almost immediately, and Squaresoft was forced into a merger with rival Enix to survive. Even today, the film is remembered less for its artistry and more for how it burned through money. It's still brought up as the ultimate tech-over story, cautionary tale, a project so ambitious it destroyed its own creators. Looney Tunes, Back in Action 2003. After Space Jam charmed audiences in 1996, Warner Brothers thought the Looney Tunes could anchor another hit. Back in Action dropped basketball entirely, pairing Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck with a globe-trotting adventure and Brendan Fraser in the lead. The $80 million production leaned heavily on slapstick and cartoon chaos, aiming to revive the zany energy of the classics. But without a clear hook, audiences weren't interested. Critics were lukewarm, and opening weekend numbers were disappointing. Worldwide, the movie brought in $68.5 million, not enough to cover its budget. The loss prompted Warner Brothers to shut down its feature animation unit and scrap planned Looney Tunes projects. The characters eventually returned in shorts and TV shows, but this flop became a case study in brand overreach. Even icons like Bugs and Daffy can't save a movie if the story isn't there. One from the Heart, 1982. Francis Ford Coppola was riding high from The Godfather, The Conversation, and Apocalypse Now. Then came One from the Heart, a romantic musical that Coppola believed would revolutionize filmmaking. Determined to control every aspect, he rebuilt Las Vegas on a soundstage, creating a dazzling, stylized cityscape. He also experimented with new visual effects, pushing the $27 million budget into uncharted territory. The film looked gorgeous, but its unconventional style alienated audiences. When it premiered, One from the Heart made just $638,000 at the box office. The financial hit sent Coppola's Zoetrope Studios into bankruptcy twice in 3 years. Coppola spent much of the next decade making films to pay off debts. The movie has since gained cult appreciation for its artistry, but at the time, it was a spectacular reminder that innovation without audience connection can destroy even Hollywood royalty. Raise the Titanic, 1980. Based on Clive Cussler's best-selling novel, Raise the Titanic was supposed to be a grand, old-fashioned adventure that would pull audiences into theaters. ITC Entertainment poured money into the production, determined to capture the epic scale of the story. They spent $350,000 building an enormous, highly detailed model of the Titanic for filming, a jaw-dropping replica designed to impress. Then came the first disaster. The model was too big for the studio's water tank. Instead of scaling it down, ITC spent another $6 million constructing a larger tank just to fit it. The costs spiraled from there. By the time production wrapped, the budget had hit $40 million, which, adjusted for inflation, was nearly the same cost as building the actual Titanic in 1912. When the film was finally released, audiences weren't nearly as captivated as producers had hoped. The worldwide box office take was a meager $7 million. The financial hit was so severe that ITC had to sell off its distribution arm just to keep its head above water. To make matters worse, author Clive Cussler hated the movie. Furious at how it turned out, he refused to sell film rights to any of his other Dirk Pitt novels for 2 decades. The Right Stuff, 1983. The Right Stuff had everything going for it. A respected director, an incredible cast, glowing reviews, and the kind of sweeping scope that screams Oscar contender. Based on Tom Wolfe's book about the early days of America's space program, it was the kind of patriotic, big-idea movie studios dream about. And for critics, it delivered. It won 4 Oscars, landed a Best Picture nomination, and Roger Ebert ranked it just behind The Godfather on his list of American epics. But ticket sales told a different story. On a $27 million budget, it pulled in only $21 million. The Lad Company, already reeling from other box office disappointments, was counting on this to save them. Instead, it became their final blow. They held on for a short while thanks to the unexpected success of Police Academy, but when their Warner Brothers deal ended, they shut their doors. Today, The Right Stuff is remembered as a cinematic triumph that audiences ignored, a reminder that critical acclaim can't always save a studio. Battlefield Earth 2000. After Pulp Fiction, John Travolta's career was back on track. Then he risked it all on his passion project, Battlefield Earth, based on the novel by L. Ron Hubbard. Travolta put up $5 million of his own money and called it Star Wars, but better. From the moment it hit theaters, critics shredded it. Roger Ebert called it unpleasant in a hostile way. The $73 million production made just $29 million worldwide, and the fallout got worse. Franchise Pictures was sued for inflating the film's budget to mislead investors. They lost, filed for bankruptcy, and disappeared. Travolta spent years trying to defend the movie, but it became a pop culture punchline. For Franchise Pictures, it wasn't just a flop, it was the legal and financial disaster that erased them. The Golden Compass 2007. New Line Cinema had just pulled off the impossible with the Lord of the Rings trilogy, so confidence was sky high. Their next big swing was The Golden Compass, based on Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials series. With a $180 million budget, the most expensive in New Line's history, they expected a global hit. On paper, they got one. The movie earned $372 million worldwide. But here's the catch. To help finance the production, New Line sold off the international distribution rights. That meant every dollar earned overseas went to other companies. Domestically, The Golden Compass made just $70 million. With marketing costs factored in, the film was a financial disaster for New Line. Worse, it underperformed with critics and sparked enough backlash to make sequels risky. The fallout was swift. In 2008, New Line merged into Warner Brothers, losing its status as an independent powerhouse. For a studio that once defined bold mid-budget hits and massive tentpoles, it was an unceremonious end. In the end, The Golden Compass didn't just fail to launch a franchise, it ended the studio that banked on it. It's a rare example of a movie looking like a hit on the surface, while secretly sinking the very company that made it. Bangkok Dangerous 2008. When Bangkok Dangerous hit theaters in September 2008, it technically opened at #1 in the US box office. But that headline was misleading. It had the lowest gross for a chart topper in 5 years, pulling in just $7.8 million that weekend. For a $45 million movie, that was a bad omen. The Nicolas Cage-led action thriller followed a hitman navigating the criminal underworld of Thailand, mixing gunfights with moody visuals. Unfortunately, critics shredded it for clumsy storytelling and wooden performances. Word of mouth was practically non-existent. The movie limped to a $42.5 million worldwide total, not even covering production costs, let alone marketing. For Virtual Studios, a mid-tier production company already in financial trouble, this was the final blow. They shut down shortly afterward, ending their run in Hollywood. For Cage, it was just another odd detour in a career full of unpredictable choices. But for Virtual Studios, Bangkok Dangerous lived up to its name, a dangerous bet that ended with them walking away from the film business entirely. Stealth 2005. Sony Pictures had high hopes for Stealth, a $135 million action spectacle about an AI fighter jet gone rogue. With Jamie Foxx fresh off an Oscar win, Jessica Biel, and Josh Lucas in the cockpit, it seemed like an easy summer blockbuster. The movie was loaded with cutting-edge aerial effects, courtesy of Digital Domain, whose film production division had invested heavily in the project. But critics tore it apart, calling it derivative and unintentionally funny. Audiences didn't bite. Worldwide grosses stalled at $79 million, barely half of what it cost to make. Digital Domain's film arm, already facing mounting costs, took a major hit. Within a short time, that division shut down completely. For Sony, Stealth was a disappointment. For Digital Domain's film branch, it was fatal. It's another reminder that no matter how shiny the visuals, if the story fails to engage, the crash landing is inevitable. The Adventures of Pluto Nash, 2002. At the time, Eddie Murphy was still a big box office draw. The Adventures of Pluto Nash, a sci-fi comedy set on the moon in the year 2087, seemed like a quirky, star-powered winner. Instead, it became one of the most expensive bombs ever. Plagued by delays and reshoots, the budget ballooned to around $100 million. The humor fell flat, the effects looked cheap despite the cost, and critics were merciless. When it finally opened, it earned just $7 million worldwide. Castle Rock Entertainment, already struggling, took a massive financial hit. The company restructured and scaled back operations, never regaining its earlier momentum. Murphy later admitted it was one of his biggest regrets, but for Castle Rock, it was worse, a deep financial crater that changed the company forever. Delgo 2008. Delgo was meant to be Fathom Studios' big break, an independently produced animated fantasy that could stand toe-to-toe with Disney and Pixar. The project had ambition in spades, a sprawling world, epic battles, and a talented voice cast including Freddie Prinze Jr., Jennifer Love Hewitt, Val Kilmer, and Malcolm McDowell. Years of development went into building its universe, with the studio banking on the idea that originality would draw audiences. But by the time Delgo finally hit theaters in 2008, the animation looked dated compared to the sleek polish of major studio releases. Worse, the story failed to connect. Critics called it clunky and unfocused, while audiences simply didn't show up. Opening in over 2,000 theaters, the film made just $511,000 in its debut weekend, a record low for such a wide release. The total domestic gross barely squeaked past $700,000 against its $40 million budget. The financial hit was devastating. Fathom Studios shut down almost immediately, leaving Delgo as its first and last theatrical release. Today, it's remembered less for its creative ambition and more as a cautionary tale. No matter how big your release, if the audience doesn't care, you're done before you start. It's a Wonderful Life 1946. It's almost impossible to imagine now, but when It's a Wonderful Life premiered in December 1946, it wasn't embraced as the timeless holiday classic we know today. Frank Capra's heartfelt drama had a $3.2 million budget, a huge figure in the post-war era, and Liberty Films, the independent studio Capra co-founded, was counting on it to be a hit. The film told the story of George Bailey, an ordinary man shown the value of his life, and while critics were respectful, post-war audiences weren't in the mood for its sentimental tone. Many were looking for lighter, escapist fare, and It's a Wonderful Life struggled to compete at the box office. It barely broke even, leaving Liberty Films in financial trouble. Within a year, the studio sold to Paramount and ceased to exist. Capra's dream of an independent creative haven was over. Ironically, the film's true legacy wouldn't begin until decades later. In the 1970s, a copyright lapse put it into the public domain, allowing TV stations to air it for free. Those constant airings turned it into an enduring holiday tradition, long after the studio that made it had vanished, proof that some legacies take time to find their audience. So there you have it, 18 movies that didn't just flop, they took entire studios down with them. Some were overhyped disasters, some were victims of bad timing, and a few were just plain cursed. Which one do you think was the most brutal studio killer? Drop your pick in the comments, share this list with your movie-loving friends, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into Hollywood's biggest blunders. After all, in this business, one bad bet can erase a legacy overnight.